I am Dr. Sarwarul Haq, Research Officer in National Mission for Manuscript. On behalf of National Mission for Manuscript, NMM, IGNCA, I welcome you all in the online Tadbodh lecture series of NMM. The theme of today's lecture is Implicit Sources of History, Importance of Analyzing Manuscripts, Preambles, Colophons, and Post-Colophonic Statements. The chairperson for this session is Professor Nab-Narayan Bandyopadhyay sir, former director, SVS Rabindra Bharati University, Kolkata, and the speaker is Professor Nirmala R. Kulkarni ma'am, research assistant, research scientist, CAS, Savitribai Phule, Pune University, Pune. I welcome you both in the program and pay my sincere gratitude on behalf of NMM IGNCA. As we all know that the National Mission for Manuscript was established in February 2003 by the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, Government of India. A unique project in its program and mandate, the mission seeks to unearth and preserve the vast manuscript wealth of India, possesses an estimate of 10 million manuscripts in known sources, probably the largest collection in the world. These cover a variety of themes, textures, and aesthetics, scripts, languages, calligraphies, illuminations, and illustrations. The mission has the mandate of identifying, documenting, conserving, and making accessible the manuscript heritage of India. We see a national effort in the form of a mission for manuscripts as a logical, radical, and urgent response to a very contemporary challenge of reclaiming the inheritance contained in manuscripts, often in a poor state of preservation, which needs more attention. National Mission for Manuscript is a national level comprehensive initiative which caters to the need of conserving manuscripts and disseminating knowledge contained therein. NMM is working towards fulfilling its motto, its mandate, conserving the past for the future. It has emerged as a movement undoubtedly the most popular and effective among all the heritage conservation initiatives in the country. As of now, the NMM has documented around 44.5 lakhs manuscripts. It has cataloged, it has documented. It has conserved more than 8 crore 45 lakh pages, folios of manuscripts, and digitized more than 3 crore pages of manuscripts. Tadbodh lecture series was started in the year 2005, and in this lecture series, the NMM invites the experts in the field of manuscripts across the nation. The lectures are published. So far, 7 volumes of Tadbodh lectures have been published by NMM, which is available on NMM website for public view at free of cost. More than 2 volumes material is with us, which are in the process of publication. I am thankful to the Member Secretary to IGNCA, Professor Sachin Doshi sir, and the Director of Mission, Professor Pratap Anand Jha, for their continuous guidance and support for organizing such lectures. I would like to introduce the speakers briefly and start the session hereafter. The chairperson for this session is Professor Nab-Narayan Bandyopadhyay sir, a former professor of Vedic Studies and director of the School of Vedic Studies, former head Department of Sanskrit. He holds uniformly a brilliant academic record, first division in all classes in all education level. He teaches Sanskrit and Vedic literature and pursues research on Vedic and Mimamsha studies. He had the fortune of traditionally learning Veda and Kavya under the feet of great Pandit Pitambar Jha and Pandit Siddheshwar Panchtirtha respectively. Since 1980, he has taught students as lecturer in Sanskrit at Bangbasi College, Kolkata, and joined Rabindra Bharati University as lecturer in Sanskrit in 1984. In 1989, he became reader in the Vedic Studies in School of Vedic Studies and was appointed Professor of Vedic Studies and Director of the school. After this date, he was re-employed as Professor of Vedic Studies for 3 years. He was appointed twice visiting fellow in the Department of Sanskrit University. He has been teaching the students receiving higher education in Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda University, Belur Math, Howrah, and Jadavpur University. There are a lot of published research papers and books to his credit, some of them like The edited books and journals include Ancient Indian Views on Truth and Falsity and Bengal's Contribution to Vedic Studies. He had visited Hungary, Finland, Japan, Bangladesh, and participated in a number of state level, national level, and international seminars, symposia, workshops, conferences, refresher courses, and presented learned papers, delivered lectures, and chaired academic sessions. He was additional chairman of the religion section of 47th All India Oriental Conference, Guwahati, 2015. He was elected sectional president of the Southeast Asian Studies section for 48th AIOC 2016. He is the life and or patron of various learned institution bodies like the Asiatic Society, Kolkata, Sahitya, Sanskrit Sahitya Parishad, Kolkata, All India Oriental Conference, Pune, etc. The speaker for today's lecture is Professor Nirmala Ravindra Kulkarni ma'am. She is a professor and research scientist since 1988, and she did her MA in 1980 from University of Pune and PhD in 1984, and her PhD is entitled A Grammatical Analysis of the Tatriya Padapatha, University of Pune. She has published around 5 books, and besides that, she has completed many projects like Salvation and Women, Srikamani in the Atharvanic tradition, etc. She has guided more than 50 students in PhD, and many awards to her, like Pandit Satwalekar Puraskar 2008, Indira Behre Puraskar 2016. She has been invited to give lectures on Veda, Manuscriptology, etc. by various universities. Worked as elected sectional president of History Srinagar as well as Manuscriptology Haridwar at All India Oriental Conferences. Worked as Adhyaksha Veda and Avesta, Brahan Maharashtra. Selected as convener at World Sanskrit Conference at Vancouver, Canada 2018, and forthcoming conferences at Canberra, Australia, scheduled in 2022. She visited Romania, Bangkok, Canada, and Croatia to attend conferences and workshops. I welcome both of you in this program, and now I request our speaker to please to give her presentation.
So thank you, Dr. Haq, Professor Navanarayan Bandyopadhyay, other eminent scholars if they are present here. I am very much thankful to National Mission for Manuscripts for giving me this opportunity to speak on implicit sources of history, which is today's topic. I will be speaking on post-colophonic statements, and this is the second time which I am giving this Tattvabodha lecture. So some years back, I had delivered the Tattvabodha lecture entitled Whispering Folios in Pune in the auspices of Anand Ashram and in the presence of Professor Deepti Tripathi, the then director NMM. The topic was similar to the present one with some different data. Her presidential observations had enabled me to look at colophons with a slight different angle. The topic of analyzing the seemingly secondary material struck me when I was editing a text entitled Paraskara Grihya Paddhati by Vasudeva Dikshita. This project was sanctioned by the Center for Social Studies, University of Pune. In the peer review workshop, Professor Bahulkar suggested that since the project was sanctioned by Center for Social Studies, I should add a social angle to it, and I should try to trace migrations of Shukla Yajurveda Brahmins. I am certainly grateful to Professor Bahulkar for suggesting me such an important aspect of Vedic studies. Being enthusiastic, I liked the idea and started pondering over the topic. And one fine day, I thought of analyzing colophons of Shukla Yajurveda manuscripts to keep the stone rolling. Thereafter, I started collecting post-colophonic statements gave many lectures and presented some papers on this topic by analyzing them from various angles. Every time I added analysis of at least 25 colophons. Later on, I encouraged one of my students to analyze around 500 post-colophonic statements of Vedic manuscripts for her doctoral dissertation. What I am going to speak today is a culmination of all these efforts taken by me. In the present lecture, I will concentrate mainly on the post-colophonic statements and give my comments on other elements in passing. The focus of my lecture today is threefold: to give a basic introduction to the important parts that define a manuscript, to argue that the post-colophonic statements whisper many things and prove themselves to be implicit sources of history, to illustrate how this information can be used in the socio-historical research. I know that the audience is well familiar to manuscripts, but there may be some students who are quite new to this area of study. For them, let me introduce a manuscript in a nutshell. A manuscript is a handwritten document scribed on material other than stone, as well as tablets, and that has come into existence before popularization of printing press or any other aesthetically or historically important document at least 75 years old. History of writing India goes back to 3rd century BC, using rock as the writing material. References to writing and various writing materials are available around 2nd century onwards, with a few significant specimens dating back to 450 AD. Writing was accepted in royal courts and in non-Vedic religions in the initial stage. After 7th century, a common Hindu elite has adopted to copy religious as well as literary texts. As a result, 7th century onwards, manuscript writing geared up and was continued till early 20th century. Printing entered in India through Goa in 1556. Yet, in those days, copying a manuscript was probably easier and cheaper than printing a text. Therefore, manuscript writing, either religious or popular, continued till early 20th century. A movement of collecting and depositing of manuscripts in specially established libraries was initiated in the colonial period. These collections are considered as cultural legacy of India. A manuscript can be distinguished from a book. A printed book is produced in mass and does not bear a stamp of individuality in contrast to a manuscript. A printed book involves inanimate agency, whereas writing a manuscript is a conscious effort of a sentient human being born and brought up in rich cultural environment. Two manuscripts of the same texts are not similar. Each has its own identity. Individuality of a manuscript is governed mainly by some external features visible in the peculiar structure of it. Just a minute. May it be written on any writing material. These external features play important role in distinguishing one manuscript from the other. A manuscript has 4 important parts. The first one is preamble or the beginning. It cites the benediction, title of the text, and the author. The family deity, Kula Devata, or adored deity, or maybe tutelary deity, Ishta Devata, is praised in the benedictory sentence or verses. Though the content of the book may be the same, yet the benediction differs depending on the religious faith of the scribe. For example, 3 manuscripts of the same text entitled Aitareya Brahmana have provided different data. One scribe has expressed benediction to Vedavyasa, Shri Vedavyasaya Namaha, whereas another scribe has bowed down to Shri Venkatesha, Shri Venkateshaya Namaha. The third one has paid homage to Nrsimha. Though rarely, prashastis are attached to the preambles. These are seen also attached to the colophons or post-colophonic statements. In general, these give information of the commission of either composing the text or copying down the manuscript. The Prashasti of Bukka attached to Sayana Bhashyas is a very good example of the first type. For the Prashastis attached to the manuscript preambles, one may refer to Prolegomena of Sukthankar. The Nepal manuscript of Adi Parvan has referred to King Jayasimha Varman of Nepal, who is stated to have built the temple of Pashupatinath. Another manuscript with the commentary of Arjuna Mishra includes 4 verses in the praise of some Gopala Bhatta who had commissioned the work to some copies. The second part of a manuscript is the main content. It gives us the text with necessary divisions such as chapters, etc. Here the marginal notes, intentional or unintentional errors, use of scripts distinguish one manuscript from the other. The third part is colophon. Colophon is a Greek word meaning summit or finishing touch, implying the concluding statement of an inscription as well as that of manuscript. To quote, for instance, Iti Shri Gopi Vallabha Charanaikatana Shri Vithala Virachito Bhakti Hamsaha Samaptaha. If observed carefully, the colophon provides the following information: the title of the text, Bhakti Hamsaha, the information of the author, name of the author is Vithala, additional information, he is devotee of Krishna, extent of the text. On the basis of the word Samaptaha, it can be inferred that the text presented in this particular manuscript is complete. The fourth part is post-colophonic statement. Many times, the colophons are appended with some statements. These are either considered as a part or parcel of the colophon or are viewed independent of it. When viewed independently, these are named as post-colophonic statements, or some scholars call it paratexts. Indian manuscripts have reserved a technical term for these post-colophonic statements, and it is Pushpika. These are shown with distinct with a symbol of flower. These are modern scholars have intermingled between the colophon and the post-colophonic statements. I prefer to consider them as an independent category. The following is the post-colophonic statement of the above discussed manuscript. Samvat 1825 Varshe Maghavadi Dashamadine Budhavare Punarasara Madhye Shri Rupa Vallabha Ganihi Shishya Pandita Manika Chandaji Bhratru Pandita Labdhi Kamala Mulina Lilekhi Swahetave. This statement provides the following information: name and information of the scribe Pandita Labdhi Kamala Muni, who is disciple of Rupa Vallabha Gani and brother of Manika Chanda, Pandita Manika Chandra. Date of copying is Samvat 1825. Place of copying the manuscript is Punarasara, which is not yet identified. And purpose of copying the manuscript is Swahetave, means for the benefit of his own. In this way, the manuscript colophons as well as the post-colophonic statements provide certain information. Till date, very less work has been carried out on the material obtained from Indian post-colophonic statements, except for some stray articles. Precursors of manuscript colophons can be traced in inscriptions. Whitney Cox has studied the scribes of the Chalukyan inscriptions and has summarized the possible results of such work. Cox has traced importance of studying eulogistic preambles in inscriptions to support the study of dynastic chronology. He has demonstrated in his article that how variously a historian could make use of them. The methodology adopted by Cox can be extended to post-colophonic statements of manuscripts as well. As it is stated above, the data utilized for the present lecture is collected mainly from the published catalogs of manuscripts, mainly of the libraries of Pune. So let us see how the information given in the post-colophonic statements can be used for understanding socio-cultural history. We have seen that these statements give information about scribal names, the place of copying down the manuscript, and date and purpose of copying. Out of these 4 factors, I will concentrate on names and place. As seen earlier, the scribal personal names form integral part of post-colophonic statements. Personal names serve mainly as an identity marker of a person. New fashions make personal names rich in variety as they serve the purpose of marking individual identity. Study of proper names illustrates the religious and social conventions of a particular group. It may also help in tracing the changes taken place in the cultural, political, as well as linguistic environment. For analysis of personal names, I have selected 2 groups of manuscripts. Group A is selected to study personal names in the perspective of Grihya Sutra injunctions, and Group B is analyzed to get information of linguistic loans as well as linguistic changes. Further, personal names from both these groups are studied to get information of other factors influencing naming a child, naming styles, and titles prefixed or suffixed to personal names. I have selected a group of 30 manuscripts of Shukla Yajurvedic Shrauta texts deposited in Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute to observe impact of Grihya Sutra injunctions on scribal personal names. The oldest of these 30 manuscripts has been copied in 1481, whereas the latest one belongs to 1852 CE. These 30 manuscripts record 25 names of scribes as well as 19 names of the owners. So far, Kane has surveyed briefly the proper names and style of naming a person in the Vedic and Dharma Shastra literature. The Grihya Sutras and the text on Dharma give injunctions of Namakarana Vidhi. Kane has pointed out the possibility of influence of these injunctions on naming styles seen in inscriptions. Sankliya, while arriving at the historical geography of Gujarat, has searched for changing styles in proper names of donors as well as those of donis seen in Gujarat inscriptions of various periods with reference to general injunctions of naming. He has pointed out to the following 3 influencing factors. The first one is impact of the Grihya Sutra injunctions. The second one is influence of astrological conventions. The third one is religious orientation. The same methodology seems to be adopted by Swati Datta in the context of names of donis occurred in the North Indian inscriptions. Here I have tried to extend it to the post-colophonic statements of manuscripts by slightly modifying the method. I have tried to search whether the scribes of a particular Vedic branch follow the injunctions given in the normative text of the same Vedic Shakha. I have made an attempt to apply the prescriptions of Paraskara Gruhya Sutra to the scribal names appearing in the post-colophonic statements of the Shukla Yajurveda Shrauta manuscripts. According to the Paraskara Gruhya Sutra, a male child should be given a name with having 2 syllables, Dvaksharam, or having 4 syllables, Chaturakshara, beginning with voiced letter, Ghoshavat Adi, having a semi-vowel in the middle part, Antaha Antastham, ending in a Guru letter or in Abhinisthana, that is Visarga, Dirgha Abhinishthanaantam, or Krutam with a primary suffix, or the word Krutam is also interpreted as an ancestral name. It seems that more than 50% of the names fit in the conventions given by the Paraskara Gruhya Sutra, and on this basis, one may observe that the proper names of the scribes of the Shukla Yajurvedic manuscripts carry impressions of the Paraskara Gruhya Sutra. Analysis of personal names in similar manner of other Vedic shakhas also may yield rich results. Personal names impressed by deity name. Sankliya has observed that in some period, a social custom of giving nakshatra names prevailed. According to him, 7th century onwards, however, the practice of giving nakshatra names seems to be ceased and names of deities were chosen. In case of the proper names under discussion, it seems that majority of these names are deity names. Such a practice has been recorded as a convention in the Mitakshara, a commentary on the Yajnavalkya Smriti. According to it, a name connected with family deity should be given to a child. Kuladevata Sambadham Pita Nama Kuryat. This is from Mitakshara. It may be observed that 11 names out of 24 show Vaishnava influence, 7 show impression of Shaiva sect, whereas 1 is Shaiva Vaishnava name. In the same family, Shaiva and Vaishnava names are seen indicating peaceful interactions amongst these sects. For example, Hari Narayana Sutta Girija Shankar. Among the names of owners, 8 are Vaishnava, 3 are Shaiva, and 1 is a combination of Shaiva and Vaishnava. In the remaining names, Deva, Jayadeva, Ratnakara do not show any relation to a particular sect. The name Kala denotes either color of the person or Yama. The name Bala, in fact, is a nickname transformed to a personal name. Ravinandana could be an deity name or any astrological name denoting Yama or Shani respectively. It seems that the name Yama was not at all tabooed till recently. For example, Yamaji. Besides impressions of deity names, astrological impact is seen on only one name, that is Syanikaka. Syanikaka, which is Shyanikaka, in fact is a tabooed, both the words are tabooed. It could be interpreted that it is a name given to avoid effects of some ill omen. Philosophical influence is visible in names Jiva and Jivanarama. Inscriptional personal names do not carry influence of philosophy. These two names are located in the manuscripts copied in Gujarat. It seems that 16th century onwards, Vallabha Vedanta has cast impressions in Gujarat region. The personal names Jiva and Jivanarama might be results of Vallabha philosophy. Various groups interact with each other because of migrations of people. This results in language borrowing. Geographical names, names of rivers, and especially agricultural terms are borrowed from other languages mainly to serve the purpose of communication. Personal names are borrowed out of fancy, either to maintain exclusive identity or to indicate higher status of an influential person. Thus, proper names in general prove to be an index of language contact when analyzed in the historical or social context. The Old Indo-Aryan has borrowed considerable words from non-Indo-Aryan. Dravidian, Munda means Austroasiatic language, or some Tibeto-Burman words, Gurushaski, as well as some remnant languages like Kusund or Nahali have provided certain words to Indo-Aryan. Right from the Rigveda, one can trace the process of borrowing. Scholars have shown personal names like Nasatya, Agastya, Kanva, Ambarisha, etc. are linguistic loans and are accumulated in the language since long. In the manuscript period, roughly 14th to early half of 20th century, the Sanskrit language was no more of a spoken language. It was merely a court language, a language of elites. It had incorporated many features of spoken languages of either Indo-Aryan or non-Indo-Aryan. Though it was not spoken, it was a medium of composing Sanskrit texts as well as that of instructions in the traditional schools. All these religious activities of Hindus were carried out in the Sanskrit language following the traditional model set in the Brihya Sutras. As a result, a new variety of Sanskrit came into existence called priestly Sanskrit, which was much impressed by the local languages. Though the main text is composed in Sanskrit, the post-colophonic statements are found composed in the priestly Sanskrit, carrying many features of spoken vernaculars. These impressions are also visible in the personal names. To examine the language contact and language change in the personal names in the post-colophonic statements, I have selected a group of 25 manuscripts of Vedic texts belonging to various shakhas from Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute. The scribal names in this group are analyzed to search the effects of linguistic borrowings as well as linguistic changes. Majority of names in the selected group of manuscripts are Indo-Aryan names, Deva, Soma, etc. Some of these names like Vishnu, Keshava, Shiva, etc. might be loans from non-Aryans. However, these are incorporated in the language at very early stage. Some names show Prakrutization. For example, the Sanskrit name Manikyaha, it changed to Manko. The name Girma may be derived from Gariman by metathesis, Giraman, as well as by elision of A and N. The name has not been attested in inscriptions. Bhikam, a curious masculine name with neuter suffix like modern Shubham, can be derived from the Sanskrit word Bhikshu and has various forms such as Bhikaji, Bhiku, etc. in Marathi. The name Bhaiya is a Prakrutization of Bhratru, commonly traced as prefix to Gujarati names. The name Bhai is not found suffixed in Gujarati inscriptions. It is an innovation traced in the manuscript colophons. The name Kanhaka is a Prakrutized form of Krishna. It is further suffixed with diminutive K. Narasahi is a wrongly spelled form of Narasi, which is derived from Narasimha. Then there is a third category in which I have accommodated names showing impact of non-Aryan languages. In this particular group of 25 manuscripts, only 3 names with non-Aryan influence are located. In the previous group, 4 such names are located. Daji, it is from Dadaji by haplology from the word Dada, is derived from northwestern languages like Pashto, Burushaski, etc. and added with honorific G. The name Dadaka is traced in the inscriptions of Jayasimha, which may be its earlier documented reference. The name Dodaraja, probably hailing from Gujarat, shows Dravidian influence. Dodda or Totta means elder or respectable, etc. Nana is derived from Nanna. The name Nanna is influenced by Kannada language and is attested in Rashtrakuta inscriptions belonging to 7th century AD. A fragmentary grant from Jodhpur dated 977 AD records the name Brahmana Upadhyaya Nannaka. The name Fakira is of Arabic origin and is absent in inscriptions. It is attested in manuscript colophons belonging to 1852 AD. Baba is attested in Pashto, Arabic, Turkish. It might have entered Indian languages through the contact with Muslims. It is not attested in inscriptions. Gulab has entered through Persians. The names are often seen with titles, either prefixed or suffixed. The normative literature cites certain customs of adding titles in according to castes. The Paraskara Grihya Sutra prescribes that the titles Sharma, Varma, and Gupta should be added respectively to Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya. The same is repeated in the Smritis. These or similar upapadas have been seen either prefixed or suffixed to proper names in the inscriptions. In due course of time, these upapadas have shown many types of additions. Out of these, some could be traced in the inscriptions and many are noticeable in the manuscripts. Scrutiny of titles preserved in inscriptions as well as in manuscripts may throw light on the development of surnames because many of these upapadas have turned into surnames. The following is a list of certain titles attested in the post-colophonic statements. Agnihotri, the adjective was restricted to persons who had established the Shrauta fires and one who offers daily Agnihotra offerings. It does not find place in the list of upapadas in Gujarat inscriptions given by Sankliya. Brahmana is prefixed to names and it denotes certain caste. Bhatta is prefixed as well as suffixed. It is an honorific upapada given to a Brahmin. It is derived from the Sanskrit word bhartru, meaning husband. In the Middle Indo-Aryan languages, the word bhatta or bhattaraka occurs with slightly changed in the meaning denoting lord. According to Sankliya, first occurrence of it is seen in Gujarat in Gurjara plates in 900 CE. It has transformed to a surname in Gujarat, Bhatt or Bhatta, in Maharashtra, Bhatt, Karnataka, Bhatt, and in Kashmir, Bhatt, Bhatta, and Bhatt. Daivadnya is missing in Sankliya as well as in Datta. It indicates astrological expertise of the person. It is either suffixed or prefixed to the names. Similarly, Dasa in inscriptions was suffixed to Shudra name following injunctions of Smritis. However, in single case attested in the manuscripts, the title is suffixed to the follower of a particular deity or guru. The scribe Prahlada Dasa describes himself as Ramadasasya Dasaha, servant of Ramadasa, a saint of Maharashtra. Dikshita also is an adjective addressed to a person who has performed Dikshani Yeshti in Soma sacrifice. It is either prefixed or suffixed to the name in inscriptions as well as in the manuscripts. Dube or Duve or Dave are abbreviations of Dvivedi, denoting expertise of the family in two Vedas. It is attested in the inscriptions, either suffixed or prefixed. Joshi is a common surname in UP, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Karnataka, and was recorded as a profession in inscriptions. It is regarded as an abbreviation of Jyotishi, meaning a foreteller. It has transformed to a surname in manuscripts. Pancholi, the Upapada, seems to be an established surname, probably derived from Panchakulin, a member of temple committee consisting of 5 members. The members of Panchakula were specially identified even in the inscriptions. The Panchakula concept has been attested in inscriptions since 800 AD. In general, the Pancholi families are Atharvavedins. Therefore, there is also a possibility that the surname is associated with the word Panchakalpin, as the Atharva Veda is designated as Panchakalpa Veda. Another possibility also prevails in this context. According to Sankliya, the families having Chauli Gotra are necessarily Atharva Vedins in Gujarat inscriptions. The name Panchauli or Pancholi may have some relation to this Gotra name. However, colophons of some manuscripts indicate Pancholis to be Shukla Yajurvedins. Agnishtoma Paddhati copied by Vishwanatha Pancholi, son of Ramji Pancholi. The purpose of copying the manuscript is cited as Putra Pautradi Pathanartham, for the sake of his own sons and grandsons. It is possible that the Pancholi family originally belongs to Shukla Yajurveda, and study of the Atharva Veda might have adopted by the family as a religious or political necessity. Such a phenomenon in case of Atharva Veda cannot be said to be a new one. Study of manuscript colophons and inscriptions may throw light on this issue. Pathaka again is an occupational surname evident in manuscripts and absent in Gujarat inscriptions. Shukla, the surname Shukla marks its association with the Shukla Yajurveda. Travadi can be derived from Trivedi, studying 3 Vedas, and it is attested in the inscriptions, either suffixed or prefixed. Similarly, Vyasa is a common surname in Gujarat and Vidarbha, denoting their profession and reciting Purana in the temples. Even in these manuscripts, the Upapadas Agnihotri and Dikshita are added to those persons who themselves have performed the respective rituals. In due course of time, these rituals became quite rare and adjectives were changed to family names. A type of surnames with suffix kar is a peculiarity of modern Maharashtrian surnames. Such a tendency is not seen in inscriptions, that is up to 13th century. The kar suffix, when added to place names, turns into family name. 3 such family names are observed in selected colophons. These are Joglekar, Khadilkar, and Naksurkar, Chandwadkar. The place names Jogle, Joglewadi near Rajapur, and Khadil or Khadi, as well as Nagarsul, may have some Dravidian influence. Besides these 3 bound Upapadas, Shri, Ji, and Sura are frequently added. With some exceptions, Shri is prefixed as honorific to names other than one's own. Bhatta Shri Damodara Sutta Hari Krishna Likhitam. It is an abbreviation of Shriman. Ji has entered after Muslim contact, whereas Sura carries impression of Jainism. While studying post-colophonic statements of the said group of manuscripts, A contrasting feature can be noticed that distinguishes Gujarati scribes from the others. These scribes mention their caste while citing their name. The Vedic manuscripts have been copied by the scribes belonging to Abhyantara Nagara, Bahya Nagara, Audich, Isora Nagara, Saraswata, Moodha or Modha, Chovisha, and Shrimal. These scribes evidently suffix the word Jnati to the caste name, Abhyantara, Nagara, Jnatiya, etc. The Gujarat inscriptions use three words denoting caste: Jnati, Kula, and Vangsha. According to Sankliya, the original inhabitants suffixed Jnati to their caste name, and migrated people and foreigners used to suffix Kula and Vangsha. Here I slightly differ from Sankliya. It could be deduced that the word Jnati was suffixed only to the Brahmin castes, whereas the word Kula was suffixed to non-Brahmin castes, and the word Vangsha was suffixed to foreign persons. So far, I could find just one statement in a manuscript from Maharashtra citing caste and gotra. The scribe Vishwanatha Gopala Daivadni, copyist of Vrataraja, hailing for Sangameshwara Durga, mentions his caste as Chitpavana and gotra as Shandilya. He has mentioned the date of copying the manuscript in Shaka as well as in Samvat, indicating his contact with Gujaratis. The question why only the Gujarati scribes are conscious of their caste remains yet unanswered. I would like to point out to the following possibilities. The castes mentioned above are the regional castes. The Panchagauda and Panchadravida division, viewing Vindhya as the demarcating line, is the starting point of regional caste formation. The first inscriptional occurrence of the term Gauda belongs to 814 AD. Brahmins started migrating especially from north to Gujarat, mainly because of their expertise in Vedic ritual or Vedic learning. Maybe the migrations of Brahmins to Gujarat and regional caste formations started simultaneously. During 475 or 750 AD, migrations within Gujarat were very few and limited to short distances. Later years, that is up to 1030 AD, these are known as years of long distance migrations in India. However, as observed by Swati Datta, Gujarati Brahmins did not leave Gujarat. It may be because of rich and religious patrons, wealthy towns, and ports favorable to get settled. Even the geography of Gujarat, surrounded by ocean, was conducive for migration from various parts of India as well as from outside India. Possibly, the veiled identity markers like Jati, Vangsha, and Kula came into existence because of dynamic religious activities in this region. As mentioned earlier, the word Jati was suffixed to Brahmin castes, Vangsha to foreigners, and Kula to other Hindus or other than Brahmins in inscriptions. Only Brahmins were involved in case of manuscript copying, especially in the Vedic manuscript copying. Therefore, the word Jati continued. Nearly about the same time, the style of surnames developed, and before that, institutions of Gotra as well as that of Upapadas were used as identity markers. The Gotra institution was not sufficient because of increase in population and split families, and however, in the context of Brahmins, it had retained its sanctity in religious activities. So actually my paper is quite lengthy, and because the time is up and there is, I am eager to listen to Professor Naval Narayan Bandyopadhyay's observations. I think I will stop here. Is it okay, Dr. Haq?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
I
ma'am,
will
for your.
incorporate whatever I have missed out here in the full paper.
Sure, ma'am.
Mm.
So I just pay my thanks to you for this wonderful paper, ma'am, on the theme Impulsive Source of History, Importance of Analyzing Manuscripts, Preambles, Colophons, and Post-Colophonic Statements. And now for the chairperson remarks, I request the chairperson for this session, Professor Narayan sir, to please for your views and remarks and suggestions.
Vishwani Deva Savitar Duritani Parasuva Yad Bhadrang Tanna Asuva Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Pariyantang Vande Guru Parampara. Respected Professor Nirmala Kulkarni, Speaker of this session, and Dr. Sara Barul Haq, Research Officer of National Mission for Manuscripts, dear participants in this lecture, and other dignitaries and guests, and also learned members of this lecture session. So I congratulate National Mission for Manuscripts for organizing this Tattva Bodha lecture on implicit sources of history, importance of analyzing manuscripts, preambles, colophons, and post-colophonic statements. The name of the lecture is Tattva Bodha. Vade Vade Jayate Tattva Buddhi, or Tattva Bodha, otherwise called Tattva Bodha, awakening of truth or knowledge of truth. We know that Sarvam Satye Pratishtitam. So, quest for truth is always welcome. And the speaker is Dr. Nirmala Kulkarni, who is research scientist, professor also of CASS of Savitribai Phule Pune University, and her name is Nirmala. So having unblemished knowledge. So Nirmala with Tattva Bodha is very much connected. Without Nirmala Buddhi, Tattva Jnana is not possible. So I thank NMM for selecting her as a speaker of this prestigious lecture. It is aptly said that Granthi Bhavati Pandita, or there is another saying, Granthavan Acharyo Bhavati. Grantha or text is generally transmitted orally, or the text is written by hand in our ancient Indian intellectual tradition. It is very much found. Handwritten manuscripts, tradition of handwritten manuscripts also is very much found. So, scribes, with the help of various tools play a major role in preparing manuscripts, that is handwritten documents. They not only copy the text, but give useful information also of historical importance. There are other importances also of these scribes, written documents by scribes that are social, religious, and of cultural importance. The additional information is given generally at the end, that is, in the colophon or in the post-colophon. Professor Nirmala Kulkarni has nicely dilated upon various aspects of the manuscripts covering this field. Her threefold treatment of the topic and 3 points relating to personal names, place names, scribes, and caste consciousness in the post-colophonic statements have attracted our attention. Heartfelt congratulations and thanks to Professor Kulkarni for this informative lecture on an unexplored subject. Thanks, Professor Kulkarni.
Thank you, sir.
After this thought-provoking lecture, I am in hesitation to speak something. I would like to narrate briefly in some interesting incidents written in the post-colophon, which have some implicit sources of history, rather personal history. Number one post-colophonic statement goes thus: Aho Sharshapa Samrajyam Etad Janita Sajjana Yama Yugmena Yatrabhut Etat Patra Shatatrayam. The fact behind this is that the text Gita Madhusudani, containing 300 folio, was copied by the students of the seminary of Shankara Mishra of Mithila within 6 hours. This information has been given by a great scholar, Professor Anantolal Thakur. So think the ability of these scribes, that they can copy 300 folio within 6 hours. This is a very encouraging information for other scribes or any copies if any. Another post-colophon states, Bhashyakara girang yatra vinashtam lekhanadina. Bhashyakara girang yatra vinashtam lekhanadina aksharam tad dasa sharma manjusunur apurayat. This is a case of corruption in the manuscripts. The Shankhayana Srauta Bhashya of Anartya, you know, this commentary was copied by the scribe named Dasa Sharma. So here is also the name can be analyzed from various social points of view. Daso and also Sharma. So you can take this name also. He confessed here that wherever something was lost in his original was filled by himself. So he has filled those left portions or lost portions. So this is a corruptive practice, but he has done it and he has confessed it. And this information is from the book New Lights on Manuscriptology. And number 3, an interesting event has been noted in the manuscript of Patanjali Charita of Ramabhadra Dikshita of 17th-18th century. which is referred to in the mentioned book also in the following way. Chandragupta wrote down the entire Mahabhashya on leaves of the banyan tree. This is also peculiar, that the text has been copied on the leaves of banyan tree. Banyan tree generally not used, but here it has been mentioned. As he was sleeping, using the manuscript bundle as a pillow. This is also peculiar attempt, that while sleeping he is using the manuscript bundle as a pillow. And at that time, a calf dragged away the juicy bundle with its teeth. Chandragupta immediately retrieved the bundle, though in several leaves, holes were left containing the letters at those places. Because of some holes were found, so he attempted to recover the text and fill the holes. So another attempt, and he recopied the whole book. What it was written by teeth. So and holes were left. So he recopied the whole work, the letters at those places. He recopied the whole work, leaving blank the punches caused by the calves, which he carefully marked with circles. Where there were punches, he marked with circle. And the relevant sloka goes thus: Bata dhru parna sthita varna melanat athaiva bhashyang nikhilang patanjale. Bata druma parna sthita varna melanat athaiva bhashyang nikhilang patanjale lilekha vatsak shata durgarhakshare sthale kvachit kundalanam akalpaya. So he marked the punches area with circles. So this is very faithfully done. Here this portion or at any fixed place, there are punches. So I am recording with circle, that please note it, that here some punches are there. So it is faithfully described, and the attempt of the scribe is very noteworthy. Next, 4. I would like to mention the colophon of a Bengali manuscript, which has historical value. Bengali Mahabharata of Parameshwara was copied by Ramprasad Sharma. He wrote at the end, Shakabda 1679 Shubedari Nawab Sirajuddaular Fauti Tarik 18 Ashar Che Oj Mirzafar Jamidar Srimati Rani Bhavani Devya Gomasta Dayaram Rai Son 1164 Pustak Samartha. From this statement, it is understood that Subedar Nawab Sirajuddaular died in Shako 1679, that is 1757 AD. And the date of this sad demise was on 18th Ashadha. Historians were doubtful about the date of Nawab's death, but this manuscript confirms the said year and the date. the information is in the book Banglar Lipikor Bivaron by Srikanta Bosu and Shubal Chandra Vishwas. So this information confirms the actual date of death of Nawab Sirajuddaulah. So very historically important is this information. There are so many references to the accounts, events, occurrences, incidents, information of historical and social value, which are yet to be traced. Interested researchers or manuscriptologists or Indologists should come forward to study the colophonic and post-colophonic statements to unravel many hidden truths or facts. We should never be bereft of granthas or manuscripts scattered here and there. Book lovers and manuscript lovers always hope. Grantha mama gratah santu. Grantha me santu prishtatah. Grantha me sarvatah santu. Grantheshveva vasamyam. So thanks to all of you for patient hearing. Anu Bhadra Ratavu Yantu Vishwatah. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your chairperson.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, chairperson, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am, the speaker of
Thanks
today's
to
lecture.
you all. Thanks to you all, especially the members of the National Mission for Manuscripts,
Thanks.
who are working very hard
Thank
for
you.
preservation, conservation, digitization of our national treasure, that called manuscripts.
Thanks.
So thanks and congratulations to all of you.
Thank you so much.
I have also delivered a lecture, Tatvabodha lecture, in the Tripura University.
Thanks.
And the topic was on Prayogas and Paddhatis,
Thanks.
importance of Prayogas and Paddhatis. The ritual manuals, I mean.
Right. All the Tatvabodh lectures which are being organized on the last Sunday of every calendar month, it is being uploaded on the NMM website on the YouTube. So after a few days now, our scholars, our students, the concerned persons can watch our YouTube channel. After editing of the entire lecture, we upload this one.
Oh, very much.
So for a record purpose, we upload all the lectures online on our website.
Thank you. Thank you.
And on behalf of NMM, once again, I thank both of you for precious time.